This one goes out to all my Colombian friends. I feel like Colombian food is not talked about as much as some of the other more popular countries' foods, but it exists in a special part of the world that grows tons of different types of produce, and I feel like they heavily emphasize their meats in this country. It's extremely hearty and always comforting. I had my fair share of Colombian food when I visited a few years ago, and I've had it whenever I could find it in the States. Today I'm going to bring you my homemade version of the Bandeja Paisa. It's basically their national dish, and it's the ultimate sampler of all their types of food. It's a lot of work if you're making it from scratch like I'm going to show you today, but I at least wanted to give you an idea of how this food is and maybe inspire you to make at least one of these dishes on your own. We're going to jump right in with the part that takes the longest, which is their red beans or frijoles. I have a pound of these red kidney beans. This type is super popular in New Orleans for our red beans and rice. If you can't find these, then pinto beans would work as well. I'm just putting them in a big bowl and covering them with about 4 cups of water to soak overnight. I would do about 5 cups actually, because some of these started to peek out of the top. And if you want, you can add a couple of pinches of salt here so they can absorb it overnight. Now on day 2, you'll see the beans have plumped up and absorbed a lot of the water. It's going to help them cook a lot faster. Into a room temperature sauce pot, I'm going to add about 4 strips of chopped up bacon. I think this is traditionally done with uncured pork belly, but this will work fine. Over about a medium heat, I'm going to let this bacon slowly render out its fat. Just stir it around until it becomes crispy, about 10 minutes. And then I'm adding about a half of a diced yellow onion, stirring that for a minute just to soften it. And then I'm adding in like 2/3 of a diced green bell pepper. You could just use the whole thing, but I'm using that other third for something else in a minute. And then I'm adding in a diced Roma tomato. You could use more than one, but this is all I had left. Keep stirring and then add in 1 carrot that's been grated on the small holes of a box grater. And finally, I'm microplaning in 2 cloves of garlic. You don't have to soften these forever, just about 5 minutes. And then we can add in our beans, which are drained at this point. Stir that a bit, and then we're going to add enough liquid to cover these beans on top. I had about a half box of veggie broth in the fridge that I needed to get rid of. And I have some of these cubes of frozen mushroom stock that I made for that date night video a few weeks ago. I figured why not add those in for extra flavor, and then I added a bit more water. You can wait till the end to do all your seasoning because we do have to fine tune it then anyway, but I think I added a little bit of Tony's Cajun seasoning and salt sometime during the vegetables. Either way, you're going to bring this up to a boil and then lower it to a simmer, and then I let that go uncovered for 2 to 3 hours just to thicken up and soften everything. You just need to stir it every 30 minutes or so and it's good. And whenever that's done, you can lower it to the lowest heat and just cover it and keep it warm. Just remember to come back at the end and taste for 1 to see if the beans are soft enough, and if they're not, just keep simmering until they are. And 2, to adjust your seasonings. I just used some more salt and Tony's until it was what I wanted. Those are just some hearty goodness, makes a ton of portions, something you can make on its own for an easy meal or snack, and pretty reminiscent to New Orleans' own red beans and rice. But now moving on to one of my favorite parts of the dish, the chicharrón. This is just a really simple, crispy pork belly that'll satisfy any craving. So do your best to find some skin-on pork belly because this isn't the same without it. I happen to find these pre-cut strips at my Hispanic market, so I take them and lay them across this wire rack because we're going to kind of cure them for at least 4 hours, but ideally overnight. For that, I'm going to add about equal parts of salt and baking soda into a container, shake that up to evenly incorporate it, and then we're going to evenly spread that across each of the strips, making sure to rub it in. The salt is going to help dry out the exterior and flavor the interior, and the baking soda will just help to tenderize it. So I let that go overnight, and you can see how the color kind of changes and it dries out. Now I'm going to cut them into 6 strips instead of the 3 that I originally had. They came about 2 inches wide, but I wanted them to be 1 inch each to make more servings. The skin is a little tough to cut through, but take your time and you'll get it. And then finally, I'm going to cut these little teeth across it. Makes for a nice presentation and makes it easier for bite-sized pieces. Just make sure you don't cut all the way through the skin, which is kind of hard to do anyway, so you should be fine.
Teethy boys.
Now that I have all my teethy boys, I'm going to lay them into 1 layer in a wide, shallow saucepan. Cover those just enough with water and then bring that to a boil. I'm going to skim this scum off the top because we're not going to be draining these, and then lower that to a medium simmer to let that water evaporate. You could just take these pork bellies and lay them into some hot oil to deep fry them. It will make them crispy, but they won't have enough time to render out their fat, so they'll still be kind of chewy and not tender in the center. As we simmer these in water, it's going to slowly evaporate, but the pork is also going to render its fat out throughout the whole process, so that when the water's all gone, you're going to be left with just the pork fat, which we can fry it in. My evaporation took like 1.5 to 2 hours, and this is where things got really dicey for me. Once these started to fry, I noticed that they were really sticking to the bottom of the pan, like really sticking, and I was trying to use a spatula to release them, but it was just tearing up the pork, and it was so tender, I guess, that it was falling apart. I basically completely destroyed all of these trying to get them evenly seared, but I'm not really sure what I did wrong. I don't know if using a non-stick pan would alleviate all this, or if I tenderized them too long or boiled them too long, but this is what most recipes I found said to do, so if you have any ideas, just I guess let me know. Either way, I added a little more neutral oil to get these crisped up, and they came out still pretty good. They just really didn't look good at all. But I removed these to a wire rack and kept them warm in the oven. I don't know, you win some, you lose some. On to the next part, which is arepas. These are super popular corn cakes in Colombia as well as a few other Latin American countries. They're super tender and crispy but fluffy at the same time. And of course, I'm going to incorporate some cheese into mine because that makes everything better. So for starters, you need to have this masa arepa, which is really easy to find in most American supermarkets. I made pretty huge portions, but I'm adding 320 grams or 2 cups of it into a bowl, 10 grams or a teaspoon and a half of kosher salt. Then I finally grated about 250 grams or a half pound of mozzarella. Most of this is going to be to stuff the arepas, but I'm going to add about an ounce into this dough, maybe 30 grams or so. It's just going to make the cheese taste throughout everything. Which, speaking of, I'm going to crumble in a little bit of queso fresco as well. This stuff is even more flavorful and that acidity is going to come through really nicely. Then about 25 grams or a tablespoon and a half of softened butter and 480 milliliters or 2 cups of warm water. Get in there with your hands and just mix this together until it forms a cohesive ball. It'll take some time, but this is pretty therapeutic. Once you get there, just cover this with a towel for about 10-15 minutes to let it hydrate, and then I'm using a kitchen scale to divide this into 16 pieces. This is going to make 8 really large arepas that we're going to stuff with mozzarella cheese. You could make 16 of them, or you could half the recipe and make 8 smaller ones, up to you. But once you have your balls of dough, you're just going to press them into flat circles. They don't have to be paper thin. You could use a tortilla press if you want, but most importantly, just make sure they're even with the one that you're going to press it together with. So each time you have 2 pieces, I'm going to grab an ounce of that mozzarella and then stuff it in the middle and press your 2 pieces of dough together and crimp the sides. Just kind of keep pressing it and flattening it out. You don't want this to be too thick. And just repeat with the rest of your dough. Meanwhile, I have some neutral oil heating on medium, just about an inch or so in a wide pan. We're going to kind of fry the outsides of these to crisp them up while keeping the inside still fluffy. This masa arepa is pre-cooked, so you don't have to worry about anything being raw. I just leave it for about 3 to 4 minutes per side and flip it. If it's not brown enough, you can flip it again at the end to get browning to your liking on both sides. Eventually, I was going in there with 2 at a time to make it more efficient, but after some time and care, you'll have all your arepas nicely fried up. I keep those in my oven as well just to keep them warm and crispy. Okay, moving on with what's called Hogao in Colombia. It's a super popular salsa and condiment used on so many dishes. It's very simple to make. You can make this the day before or a few days before, but ideally with enough time to refrigerate it for a few hours at least. So I'm finally dicing like half of a yellow onion and that last third of green bell pepper that we didn't use for the red beans. Green onion would also be traditional here if you want to put that. I'm finally dicing 3 Roma tomatoes as well, and just some fresh cilantro. I'm also grating in a couple of cloves of minced garlic. So this is simple. In a medium saucepan, I'm just going to add in some olive oil, heat that on medium, and then we're going to add in all of our vegetables except for the cilantro. We're just going to stir those around for several minutes to soften them and let them release their water. This will reduce by a lot, and after about 10 minutes, I'm going to add in the cilantro. Stir that for another 5 to 10 minutes until it's reduced nicely like this. It's like a thick salsa that you can spoon onto stuff or just have it on the side. You can season that to taste with salt and pepper and cumin. And again, I'm adding some Tony's Cajun seasoning because that tastes kind of like the flavors in Colombia. This is good stuff. You can multiply it and add a lot more vegetables to make more volume, because I am going to add a spoonful of this into our next dish, which is carne. Typically you'll see like a seared flank or skirt steak, but I honestly bought too many ingredients and elements that I didn't want to buy a whole steak, so I'm going to show you how you can do something with some ground beef. First, into another saucepan, I'm going to add in a little neutral oil. I'm going to fry off another third or so of diced yellow onion. You know I have to grate in another clove of garlic, and once those are softened a bit, these started to burn, so keep an eye on it. I'm going to add a pound of ground beef. Just mash that up and keep it moving to get browning on all sides. It'll take a few minutes to release all its liquid first, and it'll start to fry in its own fat. A lot of people stop when they're browning ground beef when they just see no more pink, but you're missing out if you don't keep browning it and get that really nice myriad reaction on the outside. All it takes is just letting it go a few minutes longer. To finish up, I'm just seasoning with salt and pepper, and then like I said, a spoonful of that Hogao. That's going to separate this from being just a generic ground beef flavor to being that Colombian flavor that we're looking for. If you want to marinate and sear off a steak, then be my guest, but I think this is just as sufficient with all the other stuff that we're adding to this dish. Which we're almost done, so bear with me. Next one is one of the most essential parts of this, which is the fried plantains. Just one of my favorite foods of all time. It's enjoyed by many in Central and South America, and it's one of the easiest things to make. So get yourself a couple of ripe plantains. Similar to a banana, you're looking for that dark yellow and browning and black spots on it. If you get the unripe ones like these green ones, then you can make a different type of fried plantain, but not what we're doing with this. So these don't exactly peel like bananas, it's a little different. I'm grabbing a paring knife and chopping off both of the edges like this, and then scoring the peel down the length of the plantain like this in a few different spots. Just try not to go too far to start piercing the actual meat. And then if they're decently ripe, you should just be able to peel this off kind of like a banana at this point, but use your knife to help you if you need it. You can shape these in many different ways. In hindsight, I probably would have sliced these in half lengthwise just to make these a little flatter and make them easier to fry, but I just kind of cut up into a few nubs of each one. Still gonna work fine. In a sauce pot, I have a couple of inches of neutral oil coming to high heat. I usually fry these around 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180°C. Just lower in your plantains and let them fry. You can flip them every few minutes just to get even browning. Most importantly, you just want to make sure the insides are cooked through. You don't want to eat raw plantain. If you want to check with a thermometer, like 170 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit is good. These can also go onto a wire rack when they're done, and that's it. I keep these warm in my oven with my chicharrones and my arepas as well. And that's basically done with everything from scratch. I did fry up a couple of chorizos colombianos. I found these at my Hispanic market once again. But if this is hard to find for you, you can use some Mexican chorizo or any smoked sausage, to be honest. I just put a thin film of oil into a pan and then just kind of fried these on every side. Just took a few minutes. Same thing here, you just want to make sure the inside is cooked through as well. Other than that, I just made up some white rice and then sliced an avocado and you're done. Just kidding, don't forget to make a sunny side up fried egg. But that's it. Now comes the fun part, which is assembling this platter. Typically you put the rice in the middle, so I'm putting it into a bowl first and inverting it. Then my fried egg goes on top of that. Then I put my bowl of beans to the left. You could just spread them on the plate, but I like to keep them in a bowl to keep it cleaner. A few spoons of my carne molida under that. I place my arepa up top and my plantains on the bottom, my chorizo to the right, and then my chicharrón wherever I can fit it on top of something, my arepa, a spoon of my Hogao salsa, and then finally my sliced avocado. This is a massive feast, and of course it takes a lot of time if you're making it from scratch. For reference, mine took me like an hour on the first day to prep stuff, and then about 6 to 7 hours on the second day to cook it all. Definitely not ideal for the average home cook, which is why it took me so long to make this in the first place. I've been trying to do this for a long time, but it's hard to find the time. Either way, the point of this is just to share a cuisine and a culture that I love and that I wish more people knew about. Hopefully you find some enjoyment out of this, but I'm gonna get right to the taste test. Of course, had to put on the shirt for the culture. Alright, I have an incredible feast in front of me. This is yet again one of the best food experiences that I've ever experienced. I love having this amount of variety in a dish. It's not super common to have, 7 or 8 different tastes of something in one meal. And just the food from this portion of the world is just some of the best. So I think it's time to dive right in. I'm gonna start with the frijoles. Provecho. I love the marrying of the Cajun and the Latin American flavors in this. It comes out great. So deeply flavored, and it's just like a red beans and rice dish that you eat here in New Orleans. You have to see how this arepa came out. Do I get a cheese pull? Absolutely I do. Amazing. All right. Yes. That has no business being so good. I really enjoy these without cheese, but putting it in there takes these to another stratosphere. I'm so glad that this food exists. All right, what about some of our carne? Man, that's so good too. Ground beef is really good if you take it all the way to that final browning stage. If you let it fry in its fat, it comes out with that steak flavor of a crust on the outside, and that little bit of Hogao inside to season it really makes a difference. Speaking of. It's a really good salsa. All right, moving on to my plantains. I love these. So tasty and so sweet. It's everything that's good about a banana except without that nasty banana flavor in my opinion. These things are awesome too. I wish I had ordered my favorite Colombiana soda for this, but Coke Zero will do. All right, moving right along, let me try one of these chorizos. Everything you love about any kind of smoked sausage, but every culture puts their own different flavorings in it and makes it their own different way, and this one's just unique and wonderful. A nice fatty bite of meat to accompany everything. Speaking of, let's try this chicharrón. Yes, I know that these did not go nearly according to plan, but I think they're still gonna be good. I mean, this whole thing was chaos, and it's still the best thing on the plate. Pork belly is amazing. But seriously, if you can help me with some tips to not turn it into this when I'm cooking it, let me know. But like I said, it's just amazing to have so many different flavors on one plate. It's just a little mix up from your standard like 3 food meals, at least in the States. I mentioned this recently in my Korean barbecue video. I just really love being able to take bites of so many different flavors and textures at the same time. This is all great. I'm surprised that these arepas came out this well. I'm not saying they don't take a lot of technique and the experts that do this really well do it well, but I didn't expect these to come out this well. At least by my hands. But yeah, this is just a great time. I wanted to pay some tribute to one of my favorite cultures. So many of my good friends come from Colombia, and I'm glad that our friendship allowed me the opportunity to go and experience food like this. I'll definitely be doing it again, and this is all really special and comforting, especially on a day like today, which is really sad for me and my family. This afternoon we're going to be going to put our dog Shayla down to rest. She's the only dog I've ever had, and she made a really huge impact on my life, and I'm sorely going to miss her. I just really felt she deserved a shout out on this channel. You're the goat, Shayla. But anyway, I am glad to share this type of food with you if you're not familiar with Colombian cuisine. I hope this can motivate you to find a restaurant near you or try it at home or even go visit. Thank you all for sticking with me and thank you for watching a long video like this. Be blessed and I'll see you next time.